again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John. Thank you very much for being here. Good topic today. Let's go for it. What is the strangest thing you've ever seen but have no proof of? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And say hello in the comments, too. Once, while working security, I watched a fat, wealthy man in a white suit and fedora laughing like Jabba the Hutt, while both a man and a woman in a very skimpy attire danced before him for his pleasure. It was both disturbing and a little entertaining in the "this guy could be a comic book villain" sort of sense. I was in line for Space Mountain. I decided to get one last ride in while my family watched the electric parade. Right as I was going to be next, they stopped the line, and frickin' Michael Jackson walks up and gets on. I have no idea what to do, so I just yell, "Michael!" and he waves. I was once working on a house with my boss and a few coworkers. It's like 12 a.m. We're about to leave. I go upstairs to grab the ladder, and I shit you not, a creature, a pale, skinny, and butt-booty-ass naked creature, ran past the doorways of another room in the corner of my eye, immediately ran back downstairs with the ladder in hand, and I haven't talked about it until now. I was thinking about my shit job and everything that sucks about it. My supervisor suddenly appears out of the blue and starts repeating everything that is going through my head as I'm thinking it. Never shook the chills off. Literally, the other night, driving in rural Ohio, I saw what looked like ball lightning trying to form off of a telephone pole, but it disappeared quick. A few days later, also saw what looked like a meteorite explode relatively close. In Madagascar, on a night walk in the forest, several hours' drive from Mahajanga, we've been out chasing a rumor of a pygmy hippo. Turned out to be a wild boar. Right in front of me, I saw a four-legged animal similar in size to a fossa. However, what was different about it was that it had 3 white stripes running lengthways down its body. Well, on the one side I saw. We told everyone when we got back to camp and got sat down with a book to go through so we could point out what it was. It was not in the book. No one believed us, but they know what I saw. I was so frustrated no one could come look for it. There is an undiscovered predator in them forests. Saw someone get kidnapped whilst staying in a hotel in Hong Kong as a kid. Was playing on my PSP by the window at like 2 a.m. and saw a car pull up next to this dude, and a bunch of guys bundled him into the car and they drove off. I didn't tell anyone for some reason, presumably kid logic, just made it so I didn't consider it urgent, but I've always looked back on that memory wondering if I saw what I think I saw, and if there was ever a missing person report put in about it or something. I had a USB that I lost 4 years prior turn up in a stormwater drain nearly 300 kilometers away from where I lost it. It was dirty, scratched, and visibly worse for wear, but still worked. Inside had exactly identical files to what I could remember when I lost it, with the single addition of some old top-down shooter game called Crimson Land. This is a great setup for a good story, and if this really happened to you, that's wild, and I hope you played that video game that was on there. I would have. Ball lightning in my house. I was smartly doing the dishes during a thunderstorm and saw a blue orb out of the corner of my eye. I turned to watch it float for a second or so. It dissipated with a ridiculously loud thunderclap. I decided I was done doing the dishes for the time being. It took out the gigabit ports on the router at the time. Thankfully, we just moved into our house, so we hadn't had the router long, then returned period. Actually, I think it completely took out the new Wi-Fi router, which is what got returned. The gigabit ports were on an older switch it was connected to. I remember as a kid, 9 years old, me and a few others were playing hide and seek. So me and this girl, who were a classmate of mine at the time, were hiding beside a house. We were able to see an older European couple having dinner, and on the center of the table was a skull. My classmate screamed and ran to the front of the house. We all gathered there, as well as some adults and the other couple. My classmate was crying, saying she saw a skull, and I said the same thing. The old couple denied it. Police were called, and I remember the old woman say, "Kids are just being kids." The police looked in the house and found nothing. The couple put the house for sale soon after and moved. Years later, I was reading an article in the paper, mid-20s, that family members of deceased World War II vets were finding souvenirs from the war, skulls, etc., and I immediately thought that it explained the skull on the table. was parked out in the country. I live in rural Illinois and saw something tall standing at the pitch black that was darker than the pitch black, and it all started moving relatively quickly toward me, and I took off like a bat out of hell. This was back in the flip phone era, so either alien, ghost, Bigfoot, or method. 3 things. Back around 1974, a boyfriend was driving me home from college. It was about 7 p.m. when I saw 3 smallish, flat, triangular objects come out of nowhere, swoop down over the hood of the car, and then swoop back up and just disappear. Naturally, I didn't want my friend to think I was crazy, so I didn't say anything, but pretty soon he said, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but did you see anything strange?" I answered, "Were there 3 of them?" We continued to talk, and it turned out that our stories matched. The things were flying in formation with flat and no windows or markings, and the color was silver or gray. I looked at the people in the other cars on the road to see if they were pointing or excited, but they weren't. This occurred while driving north on Route 91 south of Hartford, Connecticut. All I've ever been able to come up with is why Pratt & Whitney is or was located around there. So maybe it was something they were experimenting with? Nobody believes me anyway. I was walking one morning in Foggy Bottom in DC, headed to work. I came to a corner and a 4-foot lizard sitting at a street corner. It was not an iguana, it was some sort of lizard. I stopped and stared at it, and then did another guy going the opposite way. We stood for a moment, and then the other guy said, "Well, that doesn't belong here." Then we both shrugged our shoulders and went on our separate ways. I was coming back home late to a family dinner with my mom by car, and we were only a few houses from my house when I noticed in the sky, not far high in the sky, like only 50 to 75 meters high, 2 static lights, green and red. It was pitch black, so I couldn't see anything else than the lights, and I tell my mom, who was driving, about it. She sees the same thing as me, and at first is rational and thinks it's a helicopter or a drone for some reason, but she was still a bit intrigued by it. We arrived home and I step out of the car while my mom parks it in the garage, and I could still see the green and red lights only a few meters away from my house, up in the air, and not making any noise that a helicopter or drone would do. Full silence, only crickets and wind from the trees around. And just before my mom comes back to where I was, I see the green and red lights slowly drift away behind me, in direction to the sky, without any sound at all. And in the same time, another couple of green and red lights appear from there and go in the opposite direction, behind our home. I suppose it might still be a drone, or 2 drones going around by some kids, but to this day, I'm still intrigued to what the hell I stumbled upon. I was in a state park a few years ago, and I was fishing at a lake one morning. It was broad daylight, I could see pretty clearly. Anyway, I heard a sound of something on the other side of the lake. It sounded like something big, moving through the underbrush. I could see the bushes and small trees moving aside, but I couldn't see what it was. The movement was getting closer to the shore. Then the bushes nearest that shore parted, as if something was moving them. But there was no person or animal there, nothing. After a pause, there was a big splash in the lake, like bigger than a person would make by cannonballing. I still saw no creature, but as the splash subsided, a V-shaped wake formed in the surface and moved across the lake, then grew smaller, then vanished, as if whatever it was swimming deeper. I didn't wait to see or not see whatever it was resurface. I ran straight back to my car and drove away. No pictures, no video, no proof, so I never told anyone about it. I saw a car glitch in front of me. I was picking my dad up from a bar a few miles away. He was very drunk. I was 10,000% sober. When I was driving to take him home, the car in front of me literally glitched like a 3D movie, and it swerved slightly and went back to normal in less than a second. I asked my dad if I was tripping, and he looked really freaked out because he saw it too and thought it was just a drunk moment. It looked so wrong. Still freaked out, and I wish I had a dash cam at the time. So many things. The first thing I ever saw was this UFO type thing. It was very strange and quite obviously not an airplane or helicopter. It scared me so much. I thought aliens would come to my house because they somehow knew I saw them. It was a big blue diamond-shaped light that was floating in the sky. I'll never forget it. I had nightmares about it all night, and it didn't look at the night sky for years after. I was 9 years old. This isn't a scene, but I want an explanation for it, and it was pretty strange. I live in Ohio, there's your answer. Sometimes in the spring on a Tuesday, can't remember which one, at about 3 a.m. it was storming madness. booming thunder and lightning. All of a sudden, the entire earth quakes like an earthquake and lasts a good 20 seconds, and there was no thunder that preceded it. My sister, who lived about 6 miles away, immediately texts me and asks if I felt that. I say yes. The next day I ask everyone at work, and they all say no. But then my friend who lives 35 miles south of me says she felt it too. And my brother-in-law who lives 30 miles north of me felt it and caught his farm animals going crazy on camera during it. And people were posting on the Nextdoor app trying to figure out, and nobody has figured it out. Right after it happened, my sister hopped on Google and a question popped up. Did you just feel shaking? With yes or no. But I've looked all over the internet for reports of an earthquake but haven't found any. And the fact that it spanned over 70 miles is bizarre. I want to know what it was. Well, it is Ohio, so anything is possible, but a weather phenomenon or some type of earthquake, it's possible. What do you guys think happened there? This was before smartphones. I went to use a porta potty the last day of a music festival. I was in the parking area as we were leaving. I opened the door and I almost don't believe myself what I saw. It was so full of human waste, was above the toilet seat. It was like a little mountain of shit and TP. I thought about those poor bastards that had to go so bad they decided to hover. I quietly closed the door and thought to myself, I'll wait. I swear to effing God I saw a fly the size of a tennis ball. When I was like 11, I biked to my park and parked my bike in the gazebo. There was a wooden bench in the gazebo and I saw what I thought was a wet, crumpled brown tissue paper stuck to the side. I ignored it and went to play. When I was ready to go home, I got on my bike, but before I left, I looked at the tissue paper again and I noticed it had effing wings, like the kind a fly has, and they were detailed. I vividly remember noticing the chaotic line pattern on the wings, and then I saw the eye and almost puked. It was an effing tennis ball-sized fly. I stared at it for a solid 10 seconds. Thank God it didn't move, because I might have actually had a heart attack. After I got this really nasty feeling, and just the slowest biked home, like I was in shock. I had nightmares for weeks, but everyone thinks I exaggerate the story. I swear to effing God, it was the size of a tennis ball. A ghost. My mother used to work at a wellness center, and the building used for it was an old house. She had told me it was haunted by a woman and a little boy, but before this incident, that's all I knew. I was with my dad and brother picking her up after work one day, and I had to use the restroom, so I went into the building. After doing my business, I sat on the bench in the foyer, my mom's office, to wait for her while she was elsewhere in the house. Suddenly, slightly to my right of me, I saw this shape made of blue light briefly appear, moving closer to me. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. It looked sort of like a will-o-wisp. I wasn't afraid during or after. In fact, I felt very calm and weirdly safe. Later, when I told my family what I saw, my mom explained that that's how the ghost of the woman in the house appears to people. I had no knowledge of that beforehand. My mom also told me that the woman was a kind ghost who had protected my mom from a creepy guy by locking him out of the house once. One time when I was around 16, a random woman knocked on my front door. I lived in a safe neighborhood, and I answered it. She had a thick southern accent, and obviously wasn't from the area. She had a teriyaki chicken skewer and a plate of rice in her hand, and asked me what we were having for dinner. She explained that my neighbor had given her some dinner, hence the plate of chicken and rice, and asked if she could have some of whatever I made. I told her I didn't have anything prepped. She then asked me if she could use my car. I told her no, and she basically said, "No problem," and said she was going to ask my other neighbor if they had dinner to share with her. She turned around and left. I immediately texted my sister, so I knew it was real. It's one of those situations that is so bizarre that I can't believe myself that it happened. A giant glass spear-shaped rod fell out of the sky and shattered in the parking lot of a place where I worked as a security guard. Wee hours in the morning at about 2 a.m., the asphalt glowed blue for about 10 yards around the impact site. My partner and I saw it, heard it, and felt it hit. We collected a couple of fist-sized chunks and put them in our trucks. Then the men in black showed up. 2 black Suburbans with government plates, 4 men with black suits and ties in each. They collected all the rest of the pieces and left. Never said a word, didn't try to shake us down for any other pieces that we surely would have grabbed. They completely ignored us. We went back to the dispatch office and we replayed the video over and over. Still have no explanation for it. Cool. So there's video of this thing falling. you guys grabbed a sample and then a truck with apparently government employees show up to collect the evidence. You should promote this. Let's discover more. What do you guys think it was that fell? When I was about 10 years old, I was sleeping at a friend's house. We decided to not sleep for the night, but the dumbass fell asleep at 11 p.m. I decided to still do it, but at 2 a.m. I was playing on his PSP when suddenly something started glowing outside. I look it up and it was an old man outside, white, and glowing like those ghosts in movies. At first I thought I was seeing stuff, but it was way too clear for that. And then I say to myself that I was dreaming. But I decided to save the PSP game to be sure. Tomorrow, I will look up the save time. And yeah, I tried to wake up my friend, but he didn't want to. It finally stops existing at around 3 a.m., and I decide to finally sleep. At the morning, the save exists in the PSP, but still nobody believed what I saw the night since I don't really have proof. I will say it, I don't believe into anything ghost-related, but I still can't explain what I saw that night. This happened when I was in 8th grade and during quarantine. I was doing my work, and it was almost the end of the day, so I tried to finish everything as fast as I could. Keep in mind, the area I was using for online learning had a giant window right in front of me. But when I looked up, I saw about 20 to 30 deer running up to my house. They were running so fast I thought somebody was hunting them. When they were about to reach my house, they split up to go around the sides of my house. Since I left my phone up in my room, I couldn't take any photos. My mom saw the whole thing as well. That is the reason I think God was trying to warn me about something. Maybe 16 or 17 years old, driving back from family vacation, somewhere around Los Angeles, my entire family saw a big, red, perfect circle in the sky. Not the moon, since the moon could be seen in a different part of the sky. It was larger than the moon by maybe 50% and static. It didn't follow us like the moon did. We, 5 people, all saw it and were wondering and Googling what the hell it could be, but could find nothing online about any light show, celestial phenomena, or even anyone else citing it and posting. After a while, we drove far enough that we couldn't see it anymore. I guess we'll never know what the F it was. When I was in, I think, 6th grade, I woke up to see what looked like the silhouette of a man wearing a hat that could have been a fedora from what I could make out. He was standing in front of my brother's bed. My brother was still sleeping. I sort of just stared at the silhouette while squinting and trying to stay as still as possible. I was trying to think of who the hell this guy was or what he was. I thought I was dreaming, or maybe this was one of my mom's friends. I'm pretty sure I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, I saw him leave the room and turn the corner into the living room. After that, I sort of just laid there for a good sec, waiting to hear the front door open to hear him talk to my mom, but I heard nothing. Strangely enough, I wasn't scared at all. If anything, I was maybe a little confused, but other than that, nothing. So I got up and walked into the living room to perhaps greet our guest, but when I walked into the living room, I saw nothing. Not even a sign of someone even came over. Cut to 8th grade this year, I was in art class and I was telling my friends about the experience when we decided to search it up in the hopes to see if something similar had happened to someone else. Turns out, this exact thing has happened to so many people that there's an entire website for it, but yeah, that's it. One Easter Eve in the early 60s, my grandmother was up late, maybe 11 p.m., cleaning the kitchen for guests to come over the next day. Her young kids were upstairs asleep, Grandpa was in the basement fixing an amplifier, electrical engineer, and she was cleaning the floor with a sponge and a bucket. She's always done it by hand, and looked up into the kitchen window over her sink to see a person, likely a tall man based on height, dressed like an Easter bunny, like one of those mall costumes with the whole head and everything. She screamed, he ran, the police were called, neighbors were woken and warned and questioned. The Easter bunny was never caught. She said they kept asking her, "Are you sure that's what you saw?" Decades later, she told us, her grandkids, "It scared her so much, I feel like that moment is burned into my brain. I'd never forget what I saw." This was around a month ago, but it has confused my dad, his friend, and me to the hell and back. We were all sat on lunch break after having set up the planks of wood for the next part of the house we were constructing on. My dad's friend Paul stood up and walked over to put his rubbish into the bin. Within half a second, there was a massive whirl of wind, pretty much a tornado. It was so intense that planks of wood fell and we had to hold our hats onto our heads. This lasted for all of 5 seconds, but it shook us up as there was no reason. The strangest thing was that it was the only where the field was. This was where we were building. After we had finished for the day, we got into the car, still a bit shaken up from what just happened. When we were around 34 minutes away, that's specific, from home, we spotted something on the train track on the hill. We made out that it was definitely a stick vertical, but we were confused and a little bit panicked due to the fact that it was literally floating in midair. No strings, no nothing, just floating. My father stopped the car. We all stared and we asked people in another car if they saw it too, and they did. Our dumbasses didn't think to take a photo, but to just get home. After this bizarre day, we told my mother about it. She believed that we believed what we saw, but the fact that other people saw it too tells us we saw, as silly as it sounds, a bloody floating stick. Whether if you believe me or not, I just needed to tell somebody about this bonkers situation.